Going live. Hey, good afternoon, Crime Crunchies. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Courtney C. I'm your host of Crime Crunchies, and I am a 27-year veteran of the media. And today we are going to be talking about, some of the things that I'm a pretty positive person, but some of the things that we've learned in the last few days from Brian Enton about the early days of the investigation have me concerned. And I genuinely care about Nancy, and I really wanted to see her recovered. I'm going to stay positive, but I'm going to look today at some of the latest updates in the case regarding the early days of the investigation and some of the positive things that have come out recently that hopefully will help investigators move the case forward. So let me add in my little baby screen. And while I'm doing this, please remember to subscribe, like, share, comment, hit the bell. That's important for all my notifications. I like to go live. Shake your groove thing, all of those things. So, all right, let's go in. And I first want to watch the segment that Brian Enta did on News Nation and take a look at what his whistleblower insider shared with all of us. Let me get me smaller. Doodly doo. All right, here we go. Let's watch Brian and let's dig into his whistleblower.
The search for Nancy Guthrie. It's been over 2 months since she went missing, and despite all the national attention, we still have no idea what happened to her or where she might be. And as more time passes, there's more backlash against Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos. News Nation just sat down with a source close to the investigation to get a clearer look at how the case was being handled or mishandled from the start. And what we found out truly shocked and saddened us. And it also explains a great deal as to why the effort to bring Nancy home has moved so slowly. We here at News Nation have gone to great lengths to keep the source's identity a secret. They will appear on your screen in shadow, and we've disguised their voice. The voice can be a little hard to listen to, so follow along with the captions on your screen, and trust me, it will be worth it. Here's News Nation senior national correspondent Brian Enton's interview exclusively.
What would you say are the biggest mistakes when it comes to the Nancy Guthrie investigation, from what you know?
Speaking with some people that actually know the intimate knowledge of this investigation have told me that there was an immediate rush to judgment on what was happening at that scene, and it was that Nancy had somehow wandered off. And so they rushed to that judgment, stayed with that judgment, and then ran the investigation as if this was a search and rescue issue, opposed to a possible criminal issue.
From what you know, were the initial people who responded inexperienced?
From what I understand, the people that were there on the scene were not 10-year homicide detectives. They didn't have a lot of experience in homicide at that point, to include the supervisor, who, from my understanding, never investigated homicide before being installed as the supervisor for the homicide unit.
So the supervisor who first responded to Nancy Guthrie's house had never investigated a homicide?
Correct.
How is that possible?
Well, so you have decisions made by people that will install friends and people that can do stuff for them, opposed to people that are there on their merit and can do the job correctly.
Do you think not enough evidence was collected?
The fact that detectives had to return to that location not once but several times leads me to believe that they should have handled it differently. They should have kept the scene secure.
Do you get the sense right now that there's anyone that they're seriously looking at?
The people I've talked to that are still in the know on this investigation tell me that there's no direct suspect right now, no name on the table.
Is that shocking?
Not with how the investigation's gone so far. You have individuals that are either lucky as hell or more cunning than a lot of people have seen in the past. If you take the first, extremely lucky, maybe his luck will run out, but so far it hasn't. But if you take the second one, that he was extremely cunning, there's a chance that he may have covered his tracks so well that we may not find out what happened. right now.
Obviously, we're hiding your identity right now because you could get in a lot of trouble for speaking out this way. What would you want to say to the sheriff if you could?
I would say that he ruined a great department. It's savable if he steps aside, and I would ask him to step aside.
How would you describe morale at the sheriff's office right now?
I would say right now it's extremely low. This is the lowest I've seen it. There's a lot of embarrassment, especially with the news conversations that I had with Nanos, his interaction with the media.
When the press conferences started happening and the interviews with Nanos, what were you thinking?
Shut your mouth. Stop talking. That's pretty much what we were all saying. Is why is he out there saying that?
The no confidence vote, I mean, that every single deputy in the union voted that they don't have confidence in the sheriff, I think to a lot of outsiders was like, wow, I mean, every single deputy.
Yeah, this isn't the first no confidence vote that we've done. So it should have been no surprise to him, especially with what has been going on. So not only our local community, Arizona in general, but just the nation now sees that we have no faith in Chris Nanos.
Is it awkward for people working there?
I think everyone is walking on eggshells.
What would people in the department want to say to Savannah?
Just to explain to Savannah that just because we have an incompetent lead doesn't mean that we don't care, that we don't want Nancy to be brought home safely, and that we're not with her in this. We are completely with her and her family on this.
Incredible. Brian Enton joins us live from Tucson with more on his exclusive report. Brian.
Yeah, Katie, I mean, you think about how unusual it is for someone close to an investigation to speak out this way, but it shows really how desperate they are for people to know what's been going on behind the scenes, the embarrassment that people feel on the inside, and just wanting to get the word out that they do support Savannah and they're working as hard as they can, but that these mistakes early on in the investigation really caused problems. We tried to reach out to Sheriff Nanos to get a comment on all of this, Katie. We have not gotten a response. He's not granted us an interview since the beginning. We had an interview very early on in the investigation, but in the past, he has stood by his decisions and stood by the people who he has chosen to investigate Nancy Guthrie's disappearance.
All right. So it's just so much to say about this. You know, I did an entire episode on Chris Nanos. Pull up my channel here. And
Secretary Rollins.
I'm just,
okay.
He just, to me, he's
Solve
just.
for X, where X equals better grades.
See, I've got something going. Hold on. I gotta find it.
Dad,
Stop.
Are you trying to get me to say IXL?
Yep, nailed it.
Found
So
it.
cheesy.
Just part of the job, son.
I'll close this out. Sorry, guys. I believe he has, I mean, definitely a character flaw. Okay. I would say, and I'm not a professional in any way, and this is just my opinion, so just speculation, First Amendment, right of speech. I believe he has a personality disorder. And his personality disorder has gotten in the way of making decisions that were best for finding Nancy. And, you know, while they might have opted on that first day to look at it like she was wandering off, by the next day, he did have the press conference and said that they are treating it like a crime scene, which was the right thing to do. And I think everybody was hopeful that things were going in the right way. But we did not know that the supervisor in charge of that team that went out the first day, the second day, the third day, he has 0 homicide experience. And all the people that did have homicide experience, to be fair, a lot of them had retired. But if you piss off Sheriff Nanos, he likes to retaliate and move people into desk jobs or move them out and put in nepotism type people who, you know, probably stroke his ego. And I believe that that's how the supervisor got that job that had no homicide experience. So basically anyone who really could have walked in and would have known what to do, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, was not anywhere around. And the first 2 weeks plus the person who was in charge of the case was a homicide detective, but they had 2 years experience. And it's not to knock that, 2 years experience is better than what the supervisor had. But again, the person who should have been leading this up should have been a 20-year experienced person. And that just didn't happen. And to think that one of the things, one of the first things that Savannah did that day when she found out was she, coming from Tucson, she knows, I guess, a senator, an Arizona senator, and she phoned the senator. And you would have thought that phoning and knowing a senator would have helped things out. But I think that Sheriff Nanos, why I'm saying he has personality disorder, it doesn't matter if you're a senator and a senator is saying, Sheriff, please do right by this. Please put your best people on it. He didn't care. Okay. Brian Enton mentioned in that video that he's only gotten one interview with the sheriff. And I believe the reason why he only got one interview is very early on, people were reaching out to Brian Enton. And one of the people that reached out to Brian Enton was a retired investigator detective who worked for Sheriff Nanos and had nothing nice to say about this guy. He really truly sounds like a monster, a micromanager. It sounds like he would be the worst person to work for as far as the fear. If you say something wrong, if you go against them, if people are spying and they repeat that you've said something that's not to his liking, you're doomed. Okay. And the fact that it wasn't just one, vote of no confidence, apparently there had been, that was the most recent vote of no confidence, was the second vote of no confidence. So this has been going on for a long time. To say that Sheriff Nanos needs to resign is an understatement. And I put in my title, was Nancy just not important enough for the sheriff to do more to save her? Because I really feel like Sheriff Nanos has had his own interests and agenda at the forefront, including not wanting to play in the sandbox with the FBI. FBI weren't on scene for several days, and they were just two silos not communicating and talking. I'm glad that there's a task force, but at this point, any evidence that could have been found in the early days could have been walked over, trampled over, not done. And I mean, again, I'm trying to stay positive about this. I genuinely care, and I'm sick thinking that if this had been my mother, how horrifying and what a nightmare this scenario is. And I genuinely want Nancy's to still be found. But at this point, the DNA that they're saying, and everybody is waiting for this genetic genealogy DNA testing to get done, we don't even know if it's the perps. I mean, this is like Glovegate. We all were waiting on the edges of our seats for the glove DNA to come back, and it was not the perp. We don't even know if the DNA that they have from inside the house, we know that it doesn't match anyone who has been identified as being in the house, and they took swabs from workers, family, friends, anyone who would have been in the house, they've swabbed. So they know it's not one of them, but it could be a FedEx guy who has touched DNA on a package, and the package, maybe he sneezed on a package and the package was set down. We don't know. We don't know. And I'm hoping that there, is more that we haven't been told that made it obvious where they grabbed the sample from. I originally thought, if this was an SA, maybe they had something in the bedroom, but now we're hearing that the house was immaculate. And other than the blood on the inside by the front door and on the porch outside the front door, if it wasn't for that, you wouldn't have known that a crime even happened. Okay. And I feel now that the perp went in the back. There's more than one. I feel like they were in the house a lot longer than just 42 minutes. I feel like they didn't grab Nancy until the very end. and were planning to take her out through the back door. That's why it was propped open. But when they realized she couldn't walk, they're like, nope, let's change the plan. Let's get the car out to the front. That's the closest path to get her in the car. And I feel like when they're getting ready to take her through the front door is when she resisted and said, I'm not going. I'm not going. You'll have to, boom, boom me or something. And I feel like that's when somebody had to pop her to get her under control. And that's when she was injured. I don't think she was injured until then. And when we see Porch Guy doing his stupid, idiotic bit with the plants, I believe that she could have been staged inside and was not injured at that moment, and that maybe they had her bound. And I think that they had her sitting inside. They decided they couldn't go through the back. They probably sat her down somewhere and were readying the scene to get her out the front door. And that, it's really scary to think that when we're watching Porch Guy go through trying to get the camera down, that she could have been inside, still alive and well, scared, terrified, but in one piece inside. And they might have just had her posted up waiting to go through the front door. And I do feel like it was at that last minute she may have resisted. And maybe they punched her in the nose. Maybe they punched her in the stomach. And it probably didn't take a whole lot for her to start bleeding, since she's on blood thinners. And bless her heart, she probably gave a struggle at the last minute trying to save herself. And again, I really hope that her little body protected her and that she went into shock, and that whatever her last hours were, I'm hoping that she was either unconscious, didn't feel pain, and that, I don't know, I'm hoping that she was held safely and didn't suffer. So, just really, I'm just disgusted with Nanos, and everything that has happened since day one is because of his decision making. Okay. He said he wasn't going to do more interviews, and yet all he's done are interviews. I think now he's kind of backed off. I think he's feeling the heat. There was a city council, supervisor council meeting last week, and he was not invited to that meeting. And during that city council meeting, they identified that he has most likely is in contempt of perjury. And I think that the city council is now looking legally at how they can get rid of this guy. If he's never going to resign, okay, believe me, that type of personality, narcissist, he's never going to resign, because in his mind, he still thinks he's awesome. Okay, he thinks he's done the right thing. And I believe he thinks that everybody else is just coming at him, and they're trying to punish him. They're out to get him. He's probably paranoid, but at the core of his character flawed soul, I believe that he still thinks that he is in the right. And so the city council has apparently reached out to attorneys to try to see what legal loopholes, since he's an elected official, how they can maybe even get rid of him without even waiting for a recall. And that's what I think that the city, and this would be embarrassing. Imagine working in the sheriff department and coming in and doing your job and working for this maniac. How embarrassing. I mean, people are calling them the Keystone Cops. And it's not the 2-year homicide detective's fault that he was put in charge of this. If he had told the sheriff that he didn't feel ready for it, he'd probably be scrubbing toilets somewhere. The way that the sheriff just punishes and retaliates. I mean, this sounds like psychological abuse in the workplace, literally psychological abuse. And the people that have come forward, I follow other cops on other true crime channels, Duty Ron and Ed Wallace, and I watch Police Off the Cuff with Mike Geary and Bill. And they've taken a stance that they don't like people who reach out to the media. They don't like cops because there's no loyalty there. And I can see why they wouldn't want loyalty, or they would be concerned about somebody on the force going and reaching out to media and spilling some secrets. I guess it is a boys club, and they the thin blue line. But at the same time, I think that the person who reached out to Brian Enton, his face is darkened out and his voice has been digitally edited. So he's not looking for fame, in my opinion. He's genuinely trying to get the word out. And hopefully the city supervisors are able to find a legal loophole. They are going to invite Sheriff Nanos back in, and he was under oath in the beginning, and they're going to put him under oath again and ask him questions, because he did not share all the disciplinary action that he had been under. And they apparently, nobody would have hired somebody with as much discipline and 37 days of suspension in 5 years. There's nobody, he wasn't qualified to be hired. And they probably asked him if he had any infractions with his previous employer, and whoever did hire him did not check with El Paso. So, shame on Pima County for not doing due diligence. But Sheriff Nanos was most likely asked specific questions or filled things out in a questionnaire, because they do background checks. And if he lied on his resume and lied during interviews, then that could be a loophole that they get him with. And they'll probably bring him in, put him under oath again, and ask him these questions. And, oh, please get rid of him, because I feel like it'd just be like a dark cloud just lifted over this entire team, and that these people could get their mojo back. And at this point, if they didn't do the right things when they had a pristine scene with which to collect, and they opened it up too soon. And I also want to note that Sheriff Nanos was asked, would you do anything different? And he said no. Okay, again, this is a personality disorder. This is not a normal person. He will never, ever do anything wrong. In his mind, he is a god. Okay. So if they didn't get things collected correctly, I mean, this guy could have probably taken a dump in the bathroom and not flushed it, and somebody could have missed it. That's how obvious. I mean, this guy that went into the house is not that smart. It's two things. He either's gotten really, really lucky that they haven't found that one thing, or they were much better and much more organized. And, I feel like if he is one of these South American theft groups that are organized, they have a playbook, they probably know enough about the system that they tell people how to evade being caught with DNA. I mean, that's very possible. And that's why I really, honestly, I'm leaning more toward an organized theft group at this point, my personal opinion. But it changes daily, guys. It changes daily. All right. Until we know exactly, we've looked at somebody stalking Savannah. She feels like maybe it was because of her. But honestly, I really feel like they were driving around a neighborhood, the place that Nancy's house was located and how it was easy to get in the back, no fences, no dogs. They probably staked it out and saw it was just a little old lady living by herself. I really honestly think that it was random in the fact that her house just got picked. That's my personal opinion. That's where I am today. Now, tomorrow, I might come back and say, oh no, it's this other scenario, because we don't know. It's all been speculation, and I've gone back and forth a million times. I know you guys have gone back and forth a million times, but as of today, I think it was an organized group that has a playbook, and they have things that they're doing. They're sophisticated enough with the walkie-talkie, maybe a jammer, but I don't think it was a jammer. I think it was a walkie-talkie. I think that there were two people inside. I think there was a driver. They were going to take her out the back. That's why it was propped. But they ended up taking her out the front because it was the closest distance for her to walk. And I believe she resisted, and someone popped her, punched her, and that was probably the beginning of the end for this poor sweet lady. And you know, I feel really bad. Let me put on this next video. This is News Nation. They're saying that Savannah Guthrie is nervous about returning to Today. And I don't blame her, because again, you're going into this, you know, happy dappy show, and she's not happy dappy. She's ruined all the way down to her soul. Savannah Guthrie is gearing up for her April 6th return, which is literally Monday, 2 days from now, to hosting the Today Show. When her mother first disappeared in February, Guthrie had doubts she would ever go back to her job, but in the ensuing months, she has changed her mind, if only to have something to do full-time while the search continues. Savannah Guthrie returning to Today to escape living hell, friend. And this is in quotes from her friend. She has to have something to keep her mind off the living hell she is in, a friend said. And her colleagues at Today are like her family as well. But while Guthrie is excited, she is also nervous. It's such an emotional roller coaster right now, and she knows all eyes, including whoever kidnapped her mother, are on her. Guthrie is keenly aware of this and is said to be concerned she could break down on air during a show. However, I'm told everyone is supporting her and excited to have her back. And I agree. I would be very nervous, but two things on this. I would be very nervous, but I feel like the most obvious is for her mental health. She does need to get out of just sitting and hurting, physically hurting and crying and weeping, and the depression that she's in, that she's in a dark hole right now. And the only way she's going to get out of that is to go back to work and get her mind on something else, feel productive, be around lights, people who love her, and be busy. Okay. But B, I think it's important for her, in her mind, she needs to be out in the public to keep this story alive. You know, there are not that many people covering this as far as like legacy news. There's YouTubers, true crime YouTubers, who are still covering this, but nationally, like on the news, other stories have taken over, other court cases have taken over. And so I think part of the reason why she did that interview with Hoda is because she needed to do something to come out and pave her way to come back to public life. I think it would have felt unnatural for her to just been away and then all of a sudden just come in Monday morning and just go, hey guys, you know, here, let's go do a cooking segment. So I think that she needed to go in and pave the way. But I do feel like she needs to do something to keep this news story in front of people. We need to keep talking about it, and hopefully it gets to the right person. I feel like a lot of people still don't even know who Nancy is and how she's missing, especially in the community that might be able to recognize Porch Guy. So I think that's going to be kind of tough. So let's see. I'm not sure what this video is. Let me start playing it.
20 minutes past the hour here, and the Pima County, Arizona sheriff is facing a recall hearing next week over his handling of the high-profile Nancy Guthrie case. The mother of Today Show host Savannah Guthrie was last seen January 31st. And now, in a News Nation exclusive, senior national correspondent Brian Enton just interviewed somebody close to that case who claims the first responders didn't know anything they were doing when they went to the Guthrie home.
The first investigators who responded to Nancy Guthrie's home were inexperienced, and the supervisor had never investigated a homicide before, we are told. This brand new information is coming from a source close to the investigation who sat down with me for an exclusive interview on News Nation, giving new insight into the sheriff's department that's been forced into the national spotlight because of this case. We've protected this person's identity for fear of retaliation for speaking out.
From what you know, were the initial people who responded inexperienced?
The people that were there on the scene were not tenure, homicide.
Okay, I don't really want to. We've already
lot.
watched this one. I don't want to go into this again. If you are just joining us, at the very beginning of the segment, we watched the entire video of this, and this is really what the focus is today, is about the inexperience and how Nanos has really flubbed this up. If you go to my channel, day 58, I do an entire 38 minutes talking about Sheriff Nanos and basically what a tool he is. And I give all kinds of fun little details. So one of the things that I think is helpful, okay, is Nancy Grace had a segment on FBI's new lead in Nancy Guthrie case involves traceable Bitcoin ransom demands. Apparently, the ransom notes that came in that they believe are real. The FBI is still working on this, and what they're waiting for is for somebody. I guess that there's a way that they can trace it. So when somebody puts Bitcoin in your account, you can be anonymous, but when you go to get that Bitcoin out and you turn it into money and you move it somewhere, it's when you move it somewhere that you have to identify yourself, like with the bank, because the Bitcoin isn't real until you cash it out and put it into a regular bank account. And it's at that point when you have to identify yourself. And so apparently the family did not pay the $6 million ransom. They didn't. I don't know if somebody put a small amount into the Bitcoin account just to see what was going to happen. But I feel like it almost would have been better for the family to put a sizable amount in that Bitcoin so that somebody would be forced to make a move. Like put 20 grand in there. I know it sounds silly, but that's a lot of money. I get it. But put 20 grand in there, that's worth an investment to find out who this is, just at the very least, who is doing this, okay? And put 20 grand in there, enough that really anybody is gonna go and cash that in and do something with it. So the FBI is zeroing in on what it believes could be the most promising lead yet in the disappearance of 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie, according to a new report, as the case enters its third month. On a recent episode of Crime Stories with Nancy Grace, the latest developments in the case were discussed. And I'm not sure where they got this information from. Okay, I don't know who at the FBI, because they're really good about keeping their traps shut. During the episode, Grace said that authorities are working their best lead in the case, which has been ongoing since Sunday, February 1st. Many people believe that Bitcoin cannot be traced. And tonight we are learning the FBI believes that's their best lead on who took Miss Guthrie. So I'm going to put this video on. I don't think I'm going to play. I mean, it could be like 10 minutes. Let me just start playing this and let's just see how it goes. Because we're going to hear about how Bitcoin works.
His mother, Nancy Guthrie, missing day 61. Tonight, are the feds closing in on blockchain analysis of the Bitcoin demand? That's right. The ransom notes, two of them, Savannah Guthrie believes are, quote, real.
Come on. Wakey, wakey.
Is that the highest and best evidence leading police to Nancy Guthrie's kidnapper? And tonight we learn evidence in the garage. Was it totally missed by Nanos? Good evening. I'm Nancy Grace. This is Crime Stories. I want to thank you for being with us.
I'm going to move forward.
FBI called us a few hours later, wanted to, had a bunch of questions about that note. There are deadlines, I say plural, deadlines in this letter, and one is looming.
Right. If this is indeed a legit letter.
This man sent us an email saying that he will reveal the name if he gets 1 Bitcoin. We checked the account all day. He did not receive anything. The account is bare.
That's our friend Harvey Levin over at TMZ. If you will recall.
Oh my gosh. I knew I shouldn't have done that. Hold on, you guys. I hit a button. I hit this button over here. Let me go back.
Savannah. Straight out to a special guest joining us, Ari Redboard. He is the global head of policy and government affairs at TRM Labs. It's the blockchain intelligence company. Former assistant U.S. attorney in D.C., former senior advisor to the Undersecretary of Terrorism and Financial Intelligence. You can find him at trmlabs.com. Ari, thank you for being with us. Many people believe that.
All right, you guys.
Bitcoin
bear with me.
Cannot be traced.
I'm going to pull up YouTube because this new site, just bear with me, okay? I'm going to pull it up on YouTube. Talk amongst yourselves. That website kept refreshing. Nancy Grace. I think we'll have a better videos. Talk amongst yourselves. I think it was this one.
Savannah Guthrie's mother checking it out.
Still able to generate these.
Oh my gosh, you guys. Come on. I can do it.
Cannot be traced. And tonight we are learning the FBI believes that's their best lead on who took Miss Guthrie. Now, I think it's the video of the porch guy and the video of cars racing by, which is also in your wheelhouse, digital evidence. But let's address the ransom notes and the possibility, since everybody went radio silent on it, of tracing this Bitcoin request.
No, it's a great question. Look, and anytime, first of all, thank you for having me on, Nancy. Look, anytime that there's a cryptocurrency address involved in a case, it's an immediate lead. And what most people don't understand about cryptocurrency is every transaction occurs on a public blockchain, particularly Bitcoin, which is public, meaning every transaction is traceable, trackable, and immutable. In other words, it's there forever. In other words, crypto is the ultimate crime scene. You can go back in time. You know, what transactions have occurred prior to this day involving this cryptocurrency address? Has this address sent funds? Has it received funds? And ultimately, you track and trace those funds across blockchains using tools like TRM.
Okay. You do know that you're speaking to a trial lawyer. You need to explain what you're saying. When you're referring to blockchain analysis, Bitcoin transactions, if you look at them in the US anyway, they are recorded. It's almost like a Google Doc where everybody's adding stuff in, and they are in blocks. It looks like blocks where each entry is made. Think of a spreadsheet and blocks of information. Okay, we typically write in paragraphs. It looks like a block. And then you follow the chain. That's where they get the phraseology, blockchain analysis. Now, slow it down, Ari, and explain again very slowly how the feds can do this. And this is what they're doing right now, according to reports.
So what we do at TRM is we take that raw blockchain data that you're describing, that alphanumeric address, say, for example, that would be in a ransom note, and we layer it with threat intelligence. We have a team of threat hunters.
Ari, right there. You mean like the number at the bottom of your check? That. It's every Bitcoin account has an identifiable number. Like we have a social security number. It's got an identifiable number like a checking account. Is that right?
That is correct. It's a string.
Dummy down, man. Dummy down for me. Now, start over, please.
My dream is to get on Nancy Grace where she yells at me like this.
Every cryptocurrency address is a unique string of letters and numbers. And what we do is we associate those numbers with threat actors. Think terrorist financiers, sanctions, ransomware actors. And that allows law enforcement to track and trace the flow of funds, to build investigation, prosecutions, to ultimately seize back those illicit proceeds.
there has been a high level of success by the feds, by the FBI, by the IRS. You know, they're about 3 inches up everybody's tailpipe on Bitcoin. Every transaction is recorded on a blockchain. As Ari just said, Bitcoin wallets have an address and they can be watched by law enforcement. Then the tricky time is when the perp tries to cash it in. But right now, we're not at that point because I don't believe that ransom was ever paid. Straight out to Chris McDonough joining us, veteran homicide detective, over 300 homicides under his belt. He is the star of The Interview Room on YouTube, and he also is the director of the Cold Case Foundation. Chris, thank you for being with us. You immediately flagged a lot of problems with the ransom note. That doesn't mean it's not legitimate. Explain.
Well, the ransom note in of itself gives us a little insight into the behavioral aspects of what the suspect may be, trying to pull off here. And if you think about it, just what Ari said there, to use Bitcoin as a hook into the victim, well, automatically, that's just like saying, hey, I'm over here, come get me. Now, there are some sophistications, obviously, that are out of my league that Ari could talk about, but it just doesn't make sense that immediately this Bitcoin becomes, the talking point here for this case. And we have that with that guy in Hawthorne, California, who was arrested, Derek Carrillo. So it's a red flag, in my opinion.
Well, I don't think them asking for Bitcoin was a red flag. If you will recall, Savannah Guthrie took it seriously enough to say, I will pay.
We received your message and we understand. We beg you now to return our mother to us so that we can celebrate with her. This is the only way we will have peace. This is very valuable to us and we will pay.
Ari Redboard joining us from TRM Labs. Ari, first of all, there was a delay in the demand for money, Bitcoin. That's a problem. Every kidnapping for ransom, you hear immediately, give me money, and you get proof of life. Number one, there was a delay. Number two, from what we understand, there was never proof of life. Yep. Number three, going through a news outlet as opposed to directly to the family, that's also unusual.
But really quick, Savannah did say that she said we got 2 ransom letters, and that indicated to me that we heard TMZ got it and Tucson News Station got it, but she said we got 2 ransom notes that they believe are real. So did it go to the family?
But not unheard of that you don't go directly to the family. Those 3 red flags were a problem. That doesn't mean Savannah's wrong. I think she, of all of us, knows what's going on in the investigation. So tell me tonight, right now, Ari, who would be on the team tracing the Bitcoin address? In other words, tracing the ransomer. That's why I care about the Bitcoin address, because that's going to lead me to the perp. Who's doing it? What kind of people are on this team, this FBI Bitcoin team?
It's a great question. It's called the Virtual Asset Unit within the FBI. And there's a team of crypto tracers, and they're the best in the world. They've built investigations involving ransomware and North Korea hacks and terrorist financing. And what they're doing is they're using TRM to track and trace the flow of funds to ultimately identify that individual. The problem is, and you mentioned this, is that it really needs a payment. A transaction must occur in order to start that tracing and tracking. Because ultimately what you want at the end of the day are those funds to be cashed out at a cryptocurrency exchange. Because when they hit that exchange, that's when you can get that underlying user information, who owns that account. Because that exchange would have done the know your customer, right? When you open that account on a crypto exchange, it's like opening a bank account. And that's when you can really connect the dots. So crypto tracing is very powerful, but you have to have the movement of funds in order to really build an investigation.
Ari Redboard, a lot of people that aren't in our business think that solving a case is like in a movie or on TV. It's all chasing people down a dark alley and pulling a gun and saying, freeze! It's not like that. Right now, there is at least one team chasing down this Bitcoin address. At least one team. You've got another set of two teams, one in Quantico and one on the ground there in Tucson, looking for digital evidence, which is another.
I'm going to move forward in this because we've kind of touched on this, but I'm going to move it forward because she's going to be speaking with Joseph Michael Scott from Body Bags about the footprint that I covered on my show from one of my viewers on day 53. So let's move forward and let's talk about the footprint.
Rug from that little perspective there. I'm not saying that it couldn't be out of view, but there's no runner visible, which you see many times at front doors on the interior as opposed to exterior. So yeah, there wouldn't have been anything to have collected relative to a rug to bring in to do analysis there. Again, we go back to the welcome mat that's in front of the door, which of course was not collected initially.
And we've got some close-ups too of the debris of the upper right-hand side.
Right here.
That one. Okay.
This is the shoe print.
There's your shot. What about it, Joe Scott?
There's the plan.
Yeah, I'm looking at this, Nancy, and you know, the thing about blood is everybody thinks that they can spot it. Guess what? You can't. And particularly when you have a mat like this that's black. Now, if the thing was maybe beige or white or something like that, maybe it would pop, okay? And remember, it seems we don't call blood blood. We say a blood-like substance. We have to test that to make sure it's blood. But guess what? In this case, with that deposition there, we already know something here. They have tested that blood. That does come back as her blood. I don't know what's on that carpet. Also, there could be footprints on that carpet as well that you would have to use alternative lighting in order to essentially raise. So again, we've talked about maybe contact with a shoe print into the blood. Maybe it was transferred over onto the mat, but this thing's not collected. The big question, and I pose this to you, Nancy, how in the hell are you going to analyze something if you don't collect it and take it back to be analyzed?
Good point.
And they're talking about they should have taken the entire tile, and there's an opinion that if, you know, because there's just one spot here that maybe there was maybe, I don't want to call it a pile of blood, but a pool of blood here, and that they stepped in it and this made a pattern because of the rubber sole on the foot. There isn't a follow-up footprint, but he could have lifted his foot and walked back here, and they never did take this this rug. This rug is still there to this day. Ashley Banfield, let me close out some of these things. Ashley Banfield has picked up the shoe print now, and she has a blood spatter expert on, and let's watch a few minutes of this. I'm not sure, she's on for quite a bit, but I don't want to get too lost in a bunch of big words. So let's just watch. Ashley Banfield has a blood spatter expert on, talking about the shoe print on the front porch that, and I know people were like, oh, you're so awesome. No, I did. I think I might have been the first one that talked about this on day 53. And I'm proud of that. Okay. This is from a listener that joined my show. And it's very possible Nancy Grace had somebody who picked it up. And I'm very proud of that, because anything to move this forward, I have no problem honking a horn for that.
Laura is a forensic criminologist. She's the founder of Laura Petler Associates. LPA is actually an internationally recognized leader in staged death investigation. First of all, I love that title. Also expert in forensic reconstruction methodology and advanced forensic investigation. Here's my conversation with Laura. Dr. Petler, there's been so much back and forth on the internet about the blood stain, and in particular one that looks, if you zero real close in, could look like a shoe print, maybe even a cloud sneaker. When you look with your expertise, what do you see?
I see blood stains that are passive in nature and inconsistent with a beating, inconsistent with an injury happening there. It could be a transitional location. It's a waypoint, you know, blood doesn't lie, but it also it needs to be interpreted with a tremendous amount of responsibility. And it's always best actually to be ultra conservative when interpreting bloodstains, because we're looking at this way after the fact. So it's important to recognize what pictures we're using to analyze these bloodstains versus what might be photographs that might have been captured actually during the crime scene investigation.
That's a huge point to make, that these are pictures the media took. These are not the pictures that hopefully the crime scene analysts took at the
With
front door. I can
scales.
only assume. Yeah, all of that
Yes.
about, like, media wasn't there in those first 12 to 48 hours. I think that the reporters, Michael Ruiz and Brian Enton, were there about 60 hours after the fact. We'll get into why that's significant in a moment.
Okay.
And so it's really clear that, I'm asking you to look at media pictures, not crime scene analysts' photographs. So with that, and with your, very conservative look, being that nobody should have overreach when they do this, do you see what a lot of people on the internet are seeing? And that is a shoe print.
No, I don't see a shoe print. I think that you could have some type of impression there. It could be consistent with a shoe print. You do have something like right in front of it as well, but to overstate that it's like consistent with a shoe, I can't do that as a scientist. I can't even say that it's a transfer. And that's basically what we're asserting here. So like if people are on the internet are talking about the shoes being worn by the suspect in comparison to this particular blood stain, there's a whole scientific process that has to happen in order for that to be proven, either for that hypothesis to either be supported or refuted. And one of the things that I can tell you and I have the pictures pulled up on my screen next to where we're recording here. So I'm looking at the photo, and in the photo, if you had that much volume on the bottom of that shoe, not only would you consider possibly having an impression in that tile, but it might trail off as you go. So if you consider, like, dip your hands in paint and then walk them down a wall. When you start at the beginning of the wall, it's going to be heavy in paint because you just dipped your hands in paint. But as you continue walking your hands, pressing your hands down the wall, you have less paint and less paint and less paint and less paint on your hands. So in order to have like that volume, imagine how it has to be, the blood must have to be adhered to the bottom of the shoe in order for it to actually stamp a pattern onto the tile. And then what is that? All the blood? We don't have any blood before it. We don't have any blood after it.
There's no second stamp is what you're saying.
Yeah. It's
could
like
be on the rug.
it would be trailing off to me.
Could be on the rug.
That is under a normal circumstance of like if somebody steps in blood, and then it's very normal in crime scenes for us to see this pattern where you step in blood and then you walk through it and then it trails off as you're walking. And so for me, when we only have one little piece of what can be for me just several blood stains, it's the same. It actually, to me, it's almost maybe like the same pattern as we have in the photo before, where you have blood into blood. It could be blood into blood. It could be a transfer, but without more information, without measuring it, without seeing it perpendicular. So you'd have to have photography directly over top of it and things like that. And then standards and testing, it would be impossible to render an opinion on if it's consistent with a shoe at this point.
What if that was all you got? I mean, do you know how you deal with the case you're given? It's not the case you would design. If you could design it, we'd solve everything.
Right.
But if this is all you had, the naked eye looks at shapes, right? At those curvatures, they look like they're semicircle, 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 then a big break, and then behind it, a repeat of the semicircles. And that doesn't look.
It just doesn't look natural.
Natural.
Sorry, it doesn't look natural.
Like it wouldn't. Blood can't fall perfectly in a pattern. So what does that tell you?
Right. So like the target surface is the most important thing to consider here. And so you see some other blood stains that are right beside it that are round in nature.
Those are the two on
And
either side?
yes, on
Okay.
either side of it. They're very round in nature, meaning that the source that was bleeding is above that area, and the blood is only being, so when blood leaves that bleeding source, all the cells go in, and they're basically a round ball like this, and they travel through the air in a spheroid. Looks just like a volleyball or any other ball, and they travel through the air in a spheroid, and then when they impact a surface, especially a hard non-porous surface, they spread out. But when you have this type of a texture, they can become, yes, the tile, when you take into consider the fact that it's like made out of clay, it's made out of some type of rock, stone, those types of things, it may not be exactly smooth. So if you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 blood stains coming out at the same time, drip, 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 8, 9, 10, something like that in the same area, and they're all falling at the same time, that can create a pattern that might look like this too.
I don't think so. I don't know.
Could it be
Obviously,
a transfer of a bloodied object, basically stamping the blood on a non-bloody object, which would be the tile? Yes, it can be. But without further investigation and better photography, it would literally be impossible to tell, because the angle of the lens when you're taking a photograph like this, it can make it look very different than it does when you're looking at it straight down.
So answer me this if you can. I get the shape of the 3 blood drops that are directly around this little, what looks like a print pattern, might not be a print pattern, but it looks like it. What else would cause blood to be in the pattern that we're looking at if it's not a stamp?
Yeah. That's a stamp.
Multiple drops falling at in a very short period of time and landing in each other while it's still wet. So if you go back to the other photograph where it looks more scattered,
that's what it would look like.
or it looks
She's
more
coughing. This is
broken
the
up. There's another
oxygen.
photograph where
She
it looks
aspirated.
a bit more broken up. That's more consistent with a pattern we call blood into blood. So this is these are larger drops. They're about the same size droplets as probably the ones on the outside. The ones that we see that are skeletonized. And skeletonized actually means that the peripheral edge, we can see the peripheral edge around where the original blood stain impacted the target surface.
Because she coughed
So
it
when
up.
blood hit the tile, it starts to dry. Blood dries under normal circumstances within about 16 minutes after it leaves the body.
Spot.
So then as it dries from the outside in to the center. And then after it dries, after a period of time, and I've seen this, countless times in 25 years, the center of the stain will often lift from the surface of the target surface, which in this case is the tile. It curls like a wave and then blows away. And a lot of times that's because there's dirt on that surface, there's grease on that surface, there's some other type of material in between the actual target surface and the blood can't stick to it. But in this case, the blood did stick. It did stick in the center. We don't see any skeleton.
I'm sorry. This does not look anything like any other blood on this entire porch. And so I get she's a blood spatter expert. I'm not. I don't even play one on TV. I get it. But this is just common sense. This does not look like anything else that we've seen here. And the belief is that she aspirated the blood up out of her mouth. And I'm sorry, this looks like a heel pattern. And then it goes down and out. And yeah, I understand that there isn't another step, but he could have stepped on this. He could have stepped on this rug here. All right, I'll continue.
Skeletonization, except if those areas where you see where there's no blood are those actual areas of flaking like we see in the other 2 blood stains that are beside it. So like it could be consistent with the drying element of under normal circumstances, and then the pieces that are missing could have blown away.
I'm super interested that you say the skeletonizing, the flaking, because like I said, I think that I'm going to give a really rough estimate here, but I think these videos by Michael Ruiz and Brian Enton were taken around 60 hours after Nancy disappeared. And in that 60-hour time, lots of things happened. There presumably was a sizable number of agents and sheriff's deputies and patrolmen and homicide response team, ERT, evidence response team members. I don't know how many people might have just walked over it. To me, that sounds crazy. You see blood, you avoid it, you tape it off.
But the family
I don't know
too.
that at the beginning they didn't see it. They showed up to what they thought was a missing woman. They knocked on the door, stood there, walked around, talked, looked around the front, were stepping in, and maybe didn't notice it right away. So it's possible that this has been walked on.
I would actually grid this whole thing off on the front porch. Yes, we have these beautiful tiles that could act as help. You know what I mean? To help understand the size and the shape of the suspect's shoes and, you know, how he walks and all that stuff. But I would actually grid these off into areas. So, you know, all these.
I'm going to fast forward this to the next person, and then I'll see what he's talking about.
This impression, if it is one.
So I frequently see crime scene photographs that are missing scale, right? So the ruler, right? Everybody knows what that looks like. And so when I'm missing scale, I need to find other things in those photographs to help me get a sense of, you know, relative size. So I can't tell from those photographs just yet because exterior tiles can be 16 inches square. You know, interior tiles are very often 12 inches square, which gives me a rougher sense of what we're looking at. But I'll give you a better way to get a sense of, is this footwear or is this something else? So we have this whole group of reagents that we use when we're working with bloodstains, and they're called latent development reagents. And we use these not to determine is it blood or isn't it blood, but we use them in situations where we think blood is supposed to be here, but we don't see any. And when we use these reagents, or very often we spray them onto surfaces, what happens is in the presence of blood, we get a color change. And so there's a reagent that's called leucocrystal.
It gets too technical. And, you know, the whole idea behind this was from what I understand, the drops that are the biggest drops we see, they call them skeletonized because they have a clear center coming out of her mouth. If it had an oxygen bubble inside the blood, because it looks like she's coughing it up, that would have created that clear center. And, you know, again, not an expert. They're experts, might be totally wrong, but even you guys are commenting. It's clearly not it does not match any other spot on that porch. And it looks like a shoe print. And I don't know how it got there. I don't know how he walked in it. But she was supposedly in her jammies and barefoot. So again, I believe that she resisted on the other side of the door when they were getting ready to take her out. She resisted, saying, "This is my last chance. I've got to do something to get away from these people." She's terrified. I think he popped her either in the stomach, which would have made an internal bleeding, or hard to breathe in her lung, broke a rib because she's very fragile and it comes out. Some people have mentioned her nose, but I think that the way that it looks almost like spittle, I believe somebody punched her in the stomach or the ribs, making it hard for her to breathe. And I believe that she coughed up the blood and it went like that. And it went in that pattern. And there's no way that I don't know. I just don't see a world where that shoe print is not a shoe print. Okay. Just the way that it's shaped. So, all right, moving on from that. The only other thing I wanted to show is Brian Enton has a producer who went out, and I just wanted to show this particular part of where she's with this person out in the desert, and he walks past her into some shrubbery and you can't see him. And these people that, especially if it's these theft organization groups, they're not afraid to walk in the desert, and they're covered head to toe. So if they're butting up against cacti, you know, they're not going to get that hurt, and they're on a mission. So they probably have adrenaline going. They don't care. They're going to go and walk through whatever desert they have to. And especially if they dumped her, which is what people are thinking has happened, they only have to walk 20 feet out and they can dump her. So let me play just a few minutes of this.
So there's just a ton of stuff going on out there, and it's just so vast. And a lot of times, you know, you just
a few
can't
minutes.
find what you're looking for, even if you have very specific locations, and it takes time. And that's really what we're going to do today, just kind of go out there and get a feel for it, and specifically go to some areas that I have firsthand experience with, where crimes have occurred, bodies have been found, things like that. Some of these roads, when I used to work out here, they were like super highways for criminal activity.
Yeah.
Whether it be people or drugs.
Just take a look around and see where we're going. We're out here in the desert, and the trees are like higher than you are. And then there's a little path behind you. Here's where we drove the car to, and they're over my head and over Bob's head.
We are technically on Saguaro National Monument, but it is what it is. You see the trees. We're starting to get into hilly areas, all kinds of brush that's easily, you know, you can easily hide in, leave things at, get out of sight very, very quickly. And right now we're only, you know, probably less than a half mile from the main road. This little track here will take you 100 miles south and get you into Mexico if you want. In my time with the Sheriff's Department, I supervised our border crime unit for almost 5 years. And we basically lived in this area of the county. From the start of our shift to the end of our shift, we would be out here looking for all the crime, the criminal activity that goes along with just being this close to the border. This unfortunately is an area where bodies have been found. We've had multiple homicide victims, bodies dumped in the area. Specifically, we had I guess we can call him a serial killer. His name was Christopher Clements. He kidnapped and killed Isabel Celis. He's been convicted of another one. And both of their bodies were recovered within, you know, 9 iron of where we are now. Just north of here, we've had battling rival gang members getting shootouts. So we stumbled upon multiple homicide
I'm going to fast forward to where he walks off.
3 or 4 others, bodies that were victims of violent crimes that were left out here as well. Just get up into some of these treeless areas.
So he's just walking away from her. And if, you know, there are no trails here. If you're not on a hiking trail.
You can see me right now, but I can see you perfectly, and you're probably 25 feet away from me.
Wow. We haven't seen anyone in the last 45 minutes.
You know.
So yeah, and so the idea behind this is, again, there's no way that where they put her, unless somebody is able to come forward and identify where they put her, they're probably never going to find this poor woman. And I hope that the family is getting some therapy and wrapping their head around the fact that they may not get that kind of closure. If they don't catch somebody, I don't know how they're going to get Nancy's body back. So, all right. Well, I really appreciate everybody coming and spending the afternoon with me. Please remember to subscribe, like, share, comment, hit that bell, that notification bell. And I do go live about every other day or so. But if there's anything major, I will go live at whatever time. I'm waiting every day, hoping that we get some news. So, but until then, I hope to catch everybody on the flip side. See you then.